Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. Alright, let's build this out step by step into a full 2,000-word story, written in long flowing paragraphs without headlines, just like you prefer for your YNR narration pieces. I'll expand it part by part to make sure the pace feels natural, emotional, and dramatic enough for YouTube storytelling. When the news first broke through Genoa City's buzzing rumor mill, most people didn't even believe it. The whispers started quietly: an overheard conversation, a misplaced document, a name that shouldn't have been tied to another. It seemed too far-fetched to even be true, something you would expect in a novel, not real life. For years, everyone had thought the shocking revelation about Victoria Newman's long-lost family was finally settled with the introduction of Claire Grace. But what no one expected was that the real storm was still brewing, waiting to crash down on Victoria's world with even more force. Claire had been accepted as the secret child who connected her to a twisted and painful past, but the truth was even crueler than anyone imagined. Claire wasn't the only secret child. The real bombshell was that Audra Charles, the fiercely independent, sharp-tongued, and relentlessly ambitious woman, was in fact Victoria Newman's biological daughter. Not Claire. Audra. The one everyone least suspected. The first sign came in the form of a misplaced birth record, tucked away in a drawer that hadn't been opened in decades. It was discovered not by a Newman or someone looking to make waves, but by someone who worked quietly in the background at Memorial Hospital. A clerk stumbled across the paperwork and couldn't make sense of why a baby girl listed with Victoria's name had vanished from the records without explanation. The child had supposedly died, or at least that was the story told at the time, but there were inconsistencies. Dates didn't line up. Signatures looked forced. And then came the name of the doctor, someone who had long since passed, but who had been rumored to take money for switching records or selling infants on the black market. Once this information trickled into the wrong hands, everything started to unravel, because secrets in Genoa City never stay buried for long. Victoria herself had no memory of what happened all those years ago. She had been young, frightened, and manipulated by people she trusted. She believed the child she carried had been taken from her, dead before she ever had the chance to hold her. It was a trauma that she buried deep inside, something she never spoke of, not even to her closest family. For years, the wound stayed closed, though it festered in the dark. And then Claire came along, and Victoria was forced to relive it, forced to face the possibility that her lost child wasn't lost at all. That experience shook her to her core, and she thought she had finally healed when she accepted Claire. But now, to learn that another child existed, that Audra Charles was her flesh and blood, was something that threatened to shatter her all over again. For Audra, the revelation was a nightmare disguised as a dream. She had built her entire identity on being self-made, untethered from family legacies or the expectations that came with powerful names. She was ambitious, yes, but she never saw herself as someone who needed the Newman name to climb. She prided herself on using her wit, her cunning, and her ability to read people. And suddenly, to be told that she wasn't just anyone, that she was Victoria's daughter, a Newman by blood, was something that made her recoil. To her, it felt like a chain being thrown around her neck, tying her to a family whose drama was bottomless and whose legacy was both revered and cursed. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to laugh in the face of the DNA tests that proved it, to tell the world they were wrong. But deep inside, when she saw the results, she knew there was no running from it. The way the kidnapping unfolded decades ago came to light piece by piece, like shards of glass being put back together. Victoria had been manipulated by a nurse who worked closely with the doctor who delivered her baby. That nurse, driven by greed and desperation, sold the infant to another couple who were never able to have children of their own. But that arrangement didn't last. The couple fell apart, the child was moved again, and somewhere along the way, she became Audra, the woman everyone knew today. She had grown up with fragments of truth, half-stories that never quite added up, and deep down she always sensed something was missing. She didn't look like the people who raised her. She didn't act like them. She didn't feel like she belonged. But she had trained herself never to care. Until now. Victoria's reaction was almost unbearable to watch. She had spent years wrestling with her demons, but this was something else entirely. To find out that her own daughter had been right in front of her all this time, scheming, manipulating, even working against Newman Enterprises on occasion, it cut her in ways words couldn't explain. She remembered every fight she had with Audra, every sly remark, every moment of distrust, and suddenly it all twisted in her mind. She began to wonder how much of Audra's drive, her intelligence, and her fire came from her. She saw pieces of herself in Audra now, reflections she hadn't noticed before. The resemblance wasn't just physical, it was in the way Audra carried herself, the way she spoke with conviction, the way she never backed down. And that realization both warmed and haunted Victoria. The rest of the Newman family didn't take the news easily. Victor, always the patriarch, was stunned in a way few had ever seen. His daughter had been robbed of her child, his granddaughter stolen, and it reopened wounds of failure he rarely admitted to having. He vowed to protect Audra now, but his instincts to test her loyalty came roaring to the surface. Could this woman who had worked against the family at times ever truly be trusted as a Newman? Nick was skeptical, wary of Audra's motives and still protective of Victoria. Nikki, ever the peacemaker, tried to see the humanity in the situation, recognizing that Audra was as much a victim as Victoria. And then there was Adam, who looked at Audra with something close to admiration. To him, Audra was someone who had survived betrayal, who had clawed her way up just like he had. He saw a kindred spirit, though he knew the rest of the family would never see it that way. Audra herself was torn. On one hand, she wanted to slam the door on this revelation and keep walking the path she had carved for herself. On the other hand, there was a part of her, small but undeniable, that ached for the connection she never had. She had spent her life building walls, and now someone was standing on the other side, begging to be let in. Victoria tried to reach her, tried to show her that she wanted to make up for lost time, but every attempt was met with resistance. Audra wasn't the type to give in easily, and trust wasn't something she handed out freely. Especially not when it came from people with the last name Newman. The real chaos, however, wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Audra's enemies saw the revelation as an opportunity. Rivals at Chancellor Winters, business sharks circling Newman Enterprises, and even old flames of hers started to speculate about what this meant. Was Audra going to inherit part of the empire? Would she suddenly be handed the keys to the kingdom? Or would she play both sides, using her new connection to gain power while still running her own schemes? It put her in the center of a storm she never asked for, but one she was uniquely capable of handling. After all, if anyone knew how to turn chaos into opportunity, it was Audra Charles. Victoria's heartbreak continued in private moments. She would sit in her office at Newman Enterprises, staring at old photographs, wondering what her life might have looked like if Audra had been raised by her side. She thought about birthdays missed, milestones lost, and the countless moments that would never come back. She even found herself envying the people who had raised Audra, no matter how flawed they were, because they had experienced what she never could. And yet, in all that pain, there was a glimmer of hope. Because Audra was alive. She was here. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. For Claire, the revelation was devastating. She had just started to settle into the role of being Victoria's daughter, finding a family she had been desperate for her whole life. To suddenly have that ripped away and handed to someone else was cruel beyond measure. Claire questioned her place, questioned her worth, and struggled with feelings of abandonment all over again. She wasn't ready to give up her connection to Victoria, and Victoria wasn't ready to let her go either. But the truth loomed like a shadow: Claire wasn't blood. Audra was. And that truth would always complicate things, no matter how much love was involved. As days turned into weeks, Genoa City buzzed with speculation. The media caught wind of the story, and the Newman name was once again splashed across headlines. Kidnapping scandal, Newman heiress revealed, Audra Charles, from outsider to Newman legacy. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, and everyone wanted to know how it would end. But in true Genoa City fashion, the ending wasn't clear. Because this wasn't just a story about identity, it was about power, betrayal, family, and redemption. And those are the kinds of stories that never truly end. The intricate tapestry of a long-running soap opera is woven with threads of familial connection, past traumas, and secrets that simmer beneath the surface of everyday life before erupting into dramatic, narrative-altering revelations. Within the universe of The Young and the Restless, a show renowned for its deep exploration of complex character histories, the theory positing that Audra Charles is, in fact, the long-lost daughter of Victoria Newman, kidnapped in infancy, presents a compelling and shockingly plausible narrative possibility. This idea, while existing currently in the realm of fan speculation and spoiler discussion, is not without its foundation in the established lore and character dynamics of Genoa City. To analyze this potential storyline is to delve into the mechanisms of soap opera storytelling itself, examining the narrative payoff, the emotional ramifications for a core family, and the recontextualization of a relatively new character into a legacy role of immense significance. The shock value of such a revelation is undeniable, but its true merit lies in the profound and lasting consequences it would unleash, forever altering the landscape of the Newman dynasty. The foundation of this theory rests upon the established history of Victoria Newman, a history marked by a profound and unresolved trauma. As a young woman, Victoria gave birth to a daughter, a child that was subsequently kidnapped. This event, a classic soap opera tragedy, left an indelible scar on Victoria's character, a wound that, while perhaps not openly bleeding in every scene, has undoubtedly shaped the guarded, resilient, and at times, emotionally fortified woman she is today. The loss of a child is a ghost that never truly leaves a parent, and for Victoria, a figure so defined by her role as a Newman heir and a mother, this ghost represents a vulnerability that contrasts sharply with her powerful exterior. The narrative potential of this forgotten child returning is a trope, but it is a trope because it is so effective. It directly targets the core vulnerability of a central character. For decades, this storyline has lain dormant, a ticking time bomb of emotional fallout waiting for the right moment to detonate. The introduction of a character like Audra Charles, with her specific ambitions, her palpable resentment, and her mysterious past, provides the perfect catalyst for this explosion. It is a Chekhov's gun hanging on the wall of Genoa City's history. Having been introduced, the expectation is that it must one day fire. Audra Charles, as she has been presented, is a character defined by ambition, cunning, and a certain ruthless drive to secure power and position within the corporate world of Genoa City, particularly at Newman Media and Jabot. Her motivations, while often appearing to be purely careerist and self-serving, carry an undercurrent of something deeper, something more personal. Her actions frequently seem to be fueled not just by a desire for success, but by a need to prove herself, to claim a seat at a table from which she feels inherently excluded. This perceived resentment towards the established elite, particularly the Newmans, could easily be reinterpreted through the lens of a traumatic personal history. If Audra were Victoria's stolen child, her entire modus operandi transforms from simple ambition into a profound and twisted quest for belonging and retribution. Her maneuvering within Newman Enterprises is no longer just a corporate power play, it becomes an attempt to infiltrate the kingdom from which she was torn, to claim the birthright that was denied her, and perhaps, to make the mother who lost her, and the family that never looked for her, pay for their unwitting abandonment. Every slight, every obstacle placed in her path by the Newmans, would be felt not as a professional setback but as a deeply personal rejection, reinforcing a lifetime of feeling othered and unworthy. Furthermore, Audra's character exhibits a fascinating and complex dynamic with several key figures that would be utterly revolutionized by this revelation. Her relationships with Nick, Adam, and especially Victoria herself would be recontextualized with seismic implications. Her romantic and strategic entanglements with both Newman brothers take on a distinctly Gothic, almost Shakespearean quality if she is, in fact, their niece. The inherent drama and taboo of such unknowing connections are the lifeblood of soap opera narrative. But the most compelling dynamic would be with Victoria. Their interactions have been a tense dance of professional rivalry and thinly veiled antagonism. Victoria views Audra as a threat, a disruptive and morally flexible opportunist. Audra views Victoria as a privileged obstacle, a representative of the old guard. If the truth were revealed, every past confrontation would be reevaluated. Victoria's harsh words would be the unknowing rejections of a mother for her daughter. Audra's defiance would be the rage of an abandoned child toward the mother she believes lived a comfortable life in her absence. The emotional complexity of this is staggering. The revelation would force Victoria to confront the unimaginable, that the woman she saw as a rival was the ghost of her greatest loss, and that she had been cold, dismissive, and adversarial toward her own flesh and blood. The guilt, the shock, the desperate need for atonement would be overwhelming for a character of Victoria's depth. The impact on the wider Newman family structure would be equally transformative. Victor Newman, the patriarch whose entire existence is predicated on protecting and controlling his family, would be faced with a grand failure. His empire, his surveillance, his iron-fisted rule could not prevent the theft of his grandchild, nor could it bring her home. The return of a lost heir would send shockwaves through the complex lines of succession, introducing a new and wild-card player into the eternal battle for control of Newman Enterprises. For the other Newman children, it would mean the arrival of a new sibling, one with a legitimate claim but a completely foreign upbringing and a potentially hostile agenda. The established order, the delicate balance of power between Nick, Victoria, Adam, and Abby, would be irrevocably shattered. Audra would not arrive as a meek, grateful prodigal daughter, she would arrive as a battle-hardened corporate raider with a legitimate blood claim to the throne, armed with a lifetime of grievances. She would be the ultimate disruptor, a force from the outside who is, paradoxically, the ultimate insider. From a narrative perspective, the storyline offers a wealth of opportunities for exploration. It raises questions about nature versus nurture. Would a Newman, raised outside the privilege and corruption of the family, still possess the same cunning, ambition, and ruthlessness? Audra's character suggests yes, implying that these traits are innate to the Newman DNA. It explores the long-term effects of trauma on identity. Who is Audra Charles? Is it her true self, a persona crafted for survival, or merely a mask worn by a lost little girl named something else entirely? The journey of her integration, or her destructive rejection, of the Newman family would provide years of compelling drama. There is also the mystery of the kidnapping itself to unravel. Who took her? Why? Was it a targeted attack on the Newmans, a random crime, or something more nuanced? Was she raised by someone with a specific vendetta against Victor, groomed from childhood to be a weapon aimed at the heart of the family? Uncovering this backstory would inevitably pull in other characters from the past, creating a rich, mystery-laden plot that ties the present directly to an unresolved event from decades ago. The emotional climax of such a revelation is the moment of discovery itself. The sheer shock and horror on Victoria's face as the pieces fall into place, perhaps through a familiar keepsake, a forgotten birthmark, or a DNA test triggered by a suspicious circumstance, would be a landmark moment in the show's history. The subsequent confrontation would be a masterclass in emotional acting, a scene of devastating accusations, bewildered denial, and ultimately, the horrifying dawning of truth. Victoria's journey would then turn toward a desperate, likely flawed, attempt to make amends, to forge a mother-daughter bond from a relationship built on years of animosity. Audra's reaction would be equally critical. Would she be receptive? Would she be filled with an unquenchable rage? Would she use her new status as a weapon, not for acceptance, but for revenge against a family she blames for her suffering? The ambiguity of her response is what would fuel the storyline for months, if not years, to come. In conclusion, while the theory that Audra Charles is Victoria's kidnapped daughter remains speculative, its narrative power is undeniable. It is a storyline that perfectly utilizes the core tenets of soap opera storytelling: the resurrection of past ghosts, the shocking revelation of blood ties, and the profound exploration of familial trauma. It takes a character in Audra who is already established as ambitious and complex and elevates her to a legacy status, giving her every action a deeper, more tragic motivation. It strikes at the heart of one of the show's most central characters, Victoria, forcing her to confront a loss she had perhaps buried and challenging her identity as a mother and a leader. The ripple effects would destabilize the entire Newman ecosystem, creating new alliances, bitter betrayals, and a fresh, dynamic conflict rooted in decades of pain and secrecy. Beyond the initial shock value, the storyline offers a deep, nuanced, and emotionally charged path forward, exploring themes of identity, belonging, forgiveness, and the unbreakable, however fractured, bonds of family. It is a potential plot point that doesn't just create a momentary twist, but fundamentally rewires the history and future of Genoa City, proving that the most devastating secrets are not those we keep from each other, but those we keep from ourselves.